I don't know how much noise that door will make or what, but we're gonna get started. Hopefully everybody had a great lunch. And in this session, I want to talk to you about the topic called unknown prophetic ministry. Unknown prophetic ministry. I want to talk to you about that because I want you to understand that the prophetic is a gifting that will produce arrogance in your life, and it'll block the path unless you get educated and understand how to handle yourself. So we're talking about this, and we're continuing on with the thing about your mentality. Many prophets, many prophetic people suffer from unknown prophetic ministry. Now, what is it? Unknown prophetic ministry is you're a prophet and nobody knows you're a prophet. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows you. Nobody knows anything about you. And there's a reason for that. You're not relative. Nothing you're saying, nobody cares. You're not before any crowds. You're not before any people. And you're going through what seems to be very lonely seasons in your life. And many prophets at this time in their life are in a spirit of depression because nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to know. Nobody seems to understand what's going on. And it's important to them to try to find themselves. And you have to go through this type of season. And because it's the season where God is protecting you and developing you all at the same time. Most of the time, you may not have a mentor in this season, but you may have someone who from time to time is saying something or helping you or saying something trying to encourage you. And many times what happens is until you get your head in the right headspace, a lot of times people run away. They get very angry. They go through a lot of different cultural phenomena in their life. And they're trying to figure out, what did I do wrong? Why is this situation happening with me? 1 Samuel chapter 16 and through 17, there are a lot of things that I would encourage you to read to help you, because I want you to look at David as a prophet, and I want you to look at how his life develops. I want you to see a man who was in a dark place in his life. And I want you to understand what happens in your life and the things that you pretty much are going through. David has been welcomed to the palace after he killed Goliath. And this was the reward of Saul for him killing Goliath. And his life demonstrates the fight, the struggle of what must be done, what has to happen. And the question I would ask you is this. Have you identified the giants in your life? Have you identified those things in your life that you need to deal with before you truly go forth? Have you talked about them? Have you prayed about them? Have you put them before God? And have you got business with this? Because if you haven't, you're going to pretty much burn yourself out trying to go to a place where God hasn't qualified you to go. And that's what happens to so many of us. You may have a God ordained calling, a God ordained placement, but it never happens because we're in an unknown place in our life. We're talking about what's going on, but we're not getting there because we're not developing. We're running from it. We're running away from what God is doing. And here we see David, and the reason I use David is because as you study David, you'll start to understand some things about David that I promise you, as a prophet, you will start to read and you'll start to say, oh my God, I didn't realize this. Psalms 51 is one of those things that you'll start to realize about David. Psalms 51. And if you look at verse 5, it says, he speaks about the sin of his mother. David is born out of wedlock. And he speaks about this. And he vents his frustration in Psalm 69. Because in Psalm 69, he speaks about the relationship he has with his stepbrothers. And he speaks about how they treated him, and the hand-me-downs, the things that was going on in his life. It's funny because when you look at this, to add insult to injury, David was not called to the house when the prophet Samuel came. He wasn't called. His father Jesse called everybody there but who? David. Because David wasn't one of his biological sons. And because the prophet said, call your sons, because one of them's going to be the king. Now Samuel gets there and he's looking and he doesn't see it. Understand your issues, and you got to let someone go. Because if you don't, you're not going to get there. It's going to be very more difficult, or you're going to find yourself going through endless trials and tribulations. Let me say it like that. David has been called to something that's bigger than him. And here's what you have to understand. And you're being called to a place of being unknown to a place of being known. And that's a process. And you're not just going to get there. You're going to have to go through the process. And that's what's happening with David. And for most of us, we don't want to go through that process because it's a process of deep darkness. And you're going through stuff in your life. And you got to fight battles. And you got to understand why it is important and that you stay there. Why it's important that you go through what you go through. There's a spiritual war going on in your life. And because that war is going on in your life, you don't have a choice. You can try to like copy and paste and do everything you see everybody else do. It's not going to work. It's going to get you to a place where nobody showed you what to do next. And guess what? You're not going to know either. So what am I saying? I'm saying, and I'm using David as my example. He's a young man. He's radical. He's got an internal fire going on in him. He's being prepared, and nobody knows him. Now, I need you to understand that, because stop letting people tell you, yeah, they very well may say, you're going to do this, and you're going to do that, like I was listening to you. But what will happen? Nobody's going to tell you what you're going to do before you do it. And that's where the key is. Because what happens to those years where you labor and nobody knows your name? What happens to the time that you put in and you're sitting like David on a mountain with some smelly sheep and cows? Nobody knew who he was. He's the next king, but nobody knew it. He's training. He's like many of us, and you're working in an unknown work. And you better understand that, because it's in that unknown work where you're going to grow. It's in that unknown work where you're going to be able to make mistakes. You're going to make them anyway, but it's in that place where you're going to make mistakes, you're going to learn. And the question is, can God send you out? Now, the reality is a lot of people just go. That don't mean God is sent them. Can you possess what God is sending you to take? We use this word. Do you have the capacity to handle the assignment? David's battle with Goliath was a turning point in his life. While you're going through an unknown stage in your life, you're going to have something's going to happen. You're going to have a turning point. And many times it's going to come out of chaos, calamity, a struggle, something, a significant life event. David went from a shepherd boy to a household word. And just like that. But you got to understand, what was he doing when he was a shepherd boy? Preparing. And now he's went to a place where nobody knew his name. Now everybody knows his name. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's got something to say about it. And guess what? The more notoriety that comes your way, guess what else comes? The more haters come. So you got to understand that. You must understand that. And now we see David. Wasn't he the one on the mountain? Yeah, he was. And now he comes to a place. His gift has positioned him. He didn't need the sparkling resume. He just needed a relationship with God. And many, if you find yourself in an unknown ministry, and what does that mean? I'm laboring, I'm doing this. Nobody really knows my name. Nobody knows of me. I'm just laboring. It just seems like I'm a wheel that's spinning and spinning. Let it spin. And there's a reason why it's spinning. And there's a reason why you're going through what you're going through. Do you have the work ethic to handle what you're going through? Because if you don't, then understand you were there to achieve that so that you could go to somewhere else. While David was in obscurity, he was saying, yes, God. And being here is not a burden, it's a blessing. I want you to think about how he thought. Because when you look at people and you ask, or you observe them and you see, and there's something about the way champions think, whether it's a champion in sports or there's a champion for God, there's something about the way that they think and something about the way that they process information. Look at people who are successful, and not just in the prophetic, but look at people in Even a thief, look at a successful thief. He thinks differently. Yeah, he might get caught, but success is success. Success doesn't have a color or distinction on it. You can be a successful, contract killer. You look at the way they're depicted, the way that they handle themselves. They got it from somewhere. It's important. Can you deal with being ignored? That's the question I put before you. Can you deal with being ignored? Can you deal with being not invited? Can you deal with being totally rejected, even to the point where it seems like God has forgotten you? Can you deal with that? You must be able to go from a status of being unknown. And you say, well, I'm working hard. I'm doing this. I'm reading my Bible. I'm giving offerings. I'm studying. I'm doing all of that. And while that doesn't probably an answer you wanted to hear, the reality is you're in a place where you are growing, learning, and becoming. And you must be able to handle that, because what God has for you, He's going to trust you to be out there to do what you're called to do. Do understand that you will go to a whole lot of places where you might be the only one like you. Do understand that you may go to places where people are looking at you, they're judging you, they have opinions about you. They're not always going to say what they think. They're going to lie. They're going to look at things. They're going to try to trip you up. Do understand that you're going to be put in those situations, and the only thing that's relevant is your relationship with God. Do understand why you're going to be there. Have you ever seen people who can't handle prosperity? Mm-hmm. I think we all have. I've seen prophets, they get a teeny bit of prosperity. They get a teeny bit of no. Can we get you? We don't get you in this building because your head's too big. They can't handle prosperity because they slavery, they worked, they slaved, and nobody knew their name, and now 2-3 people know their name, and your head is so doggone big. All of a sudden, everything changes. They're selective. They're impressive, and they want to correct you openly, and they want to tell you you will refer to me as. This is a person who failed in the process of going through an unnamed prophetic ministry. They failed in the process because they cannot handle prosperity on any level. I want you to think about this, because what happens when people start calling you? What happens when people know you and you don't know them? What happens the first time somebody comes up and shakes your hand and says, I know you, I so-and-so, I saw you in so-and-so and so-and-so. Can you handle that? Because it's a real thing. And a lot of times we see prophets who are working, who are trying to grow, who are trying to move forward, and it seems like nobody notices them. They don't notice you in the church that you go to. They don't notice you in the community that you go to. They don't notice you in the circles that you walk in. You know what? That's the best thing in the world. Best thing in the world for you. Because you can't afford to get drunk on attention. You ever seen people drunk on it? I know people who get drunk on attention, and they become a different creature. They can't handle themselves. And that's not what you're called to do. You're looking at the lights, you're looking at the stage, you're looking at the attention, And God said, what are you doing? If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be there. If it wasn't for me, I got you out of this, I did it. And they get, because you can't handle the stage where you're at. So what's God gonna trust you with? Remember Paul? Remember when Paul got on the boat? Remember when scripture said the south wind blew? You remember when they landed on the island of Malta? You remember when everybody's watching Paul. Everybody's seeing what's going to happen. The natives, everybody's talking, and they're trying to get settled in. And here's Paul. Everybody's looking. And Paul gets bit. Yeah. He gets bit by, y'all remember that? I said Acts 28? Yeah. Acts 20, is it Acts 28 or Paul? Yeah. And Paul gets bit. And now everybody is looking at Paul. Isn't it funny how Paul kept right on doing what he was doing? He kept right on, because Paul wasn't moved by what he saw. He wasn't even moved by, the only thing that moved him was his relationship with Christ. That has to be an overriding factor, an overriding influence in your life. You're going to be in places where nobody knows you. What happens when you walk into a place? And we talked about this in the last school. What happens when you walk into a place? Nobody knows you. And you now got a word for the house, but nobody knows you. What do you do? Question, it's not a hard question, but you have to know. You don't get up and announce prophet so and so. You don't do that. Please don't do that. Find out what the protocol of that house is. Ask some questions. Because, well, I got a word. You very well may have a word. And if you don't, and if you really got a word, then give it. Well, I didn't get to give it to the people. Well, wait a minute, hold on. It wasn't your word to give. It was the word that God gave you to give. So if the word gets to the people 2 weeks later, a day later, it was you did what you were supposed to do. It is important that you don't get drunk on the attention. Because trust me when I'm telling you, that same attention will get you some attention you really may not want. I've seen this happen. You're in an unknown status. You can do a whole lot in an unknown status. The best thing you can do is prepare yourself. Because you're called, all of us, we're here. Look, there's different cultures represented here. And because there's different cultures that are represented, the different cultures are going to do things different ways. So if you're going into a culture you're not familiar with, first of all, you definitely do need to do some homework. You need to know where you're going. You need to know how, when, where, how. You need to be answering those, when, where, how, why. You need to be answering those questions. And you need to understand how to conduct yourself. You might want to do more observing than speaking. Simply because you may be known, but you might be unknown as a servant of God to them. Because the culture already existed before you got there. If you're going to be the tool of God's change, then you have to understand the culture, and you have to understand how to handle the people within their culture, or you'll lose them quick. You ever seen somebody come in the culture? It's like, I'm telling you, let me give you an example. let me use that African American example. Right. Here's a good one. Somebody walks in the church, brand new, we like Amani suits, brand new suits, driving the latest, hottest automobile, So they're throwing $1,000 seats, $1,000 seats here, $1,000 seats there. What's the first thing? A lot of times in our culture, especially in some of the southern states, first thing we're gonna holler, he drug dealer. He's doing drugs. He pimping. So and so.
Amen.
And here you go. And I could be in there and I'll be like this. And the issue I would bring up to you is this. Why is it that when God sends an example of prosperity in our midst, all of a sudden, without fail, we start downgrading it? We've got no reference, no nothing. But because of our experiences and because of our perception, all of a sudden, he's a pimp, drug dealer, gangster, whatever. And that's not always the case. And many times when God sends different ministries into different cultures, and you need to be aware of this. Some people are going to perceive you as I heard Apostle say last hour, some people are going to perceive you as a witch. Some people are going to perceive you as a warlock. They're going to perceive, you can't do nothing about that. Ain't even no need to get up there. Do what you do. What are you there to do? Let God do. Only God changes folk. Let God do that. We become so busy trying to change people. We don't even realize, do you not realize? We say, well, I'm a prophet, but yeah, you're still an outsider. You're still an outsider to their culture. You're still an outsider. That ain't trying to be a knock. That's a reality. And the reality is that because you're an outsider, you're unknown, you're an outsider, you need to have some type of respect for their culture. Just like if they came in your culture, say they came in the African American church talking about fried chicken and watermelon. Okay, yep, ain't nobody, I'm the only one who brought up on that? Okay, so I'm just saying, you have to have respect for the culture. You don't have to agree with it. There's a lot of stuff you will see that you will not agree with it, but you have to have respect. It is what it is. If you're going to change, you have to understand what has to change in order for the mentality to change. This is why you spend time in an unknown status. This is why you do that. You must do that. Because if you're going to go out here and listen, I'm going to the nations. I had a friend years ago. He still lives in Brooklyn now. He's still trying to recover. So I'm going to the nations, man. God's called me to the nations. Okay. I wasn't mad at him. I wouldn't, because I was up in New York for him. And so we were meeting at his church. Talks, I'm on my way to the nations. As soon as this meeting's over with, man, I'm fine. I'm gonna be there for 9 days. Okay, cool. Let me know how it goes. Right. and maybe you and I can go together. Maybe we can do something later. Okay, so I left New York. I came home 6 days later. 6 days later, I get a call from his fiance. She said, can you help? Apostle wanted to know you can help. You can send something so we can help get him back here. Because Apostle has been living under a house frightened for his life for the last 3 days.
Oh my God.
Under a house. Under a house. Slept there. He's hid there. He's come in and out to use the bathroom. But this has been his primary residence for the last 3 days. So 3 days, he was getting accustomed, getting ready to do ministry, and then all of a sudden, the bottom fell out. Because the culture was going through a civil unrest. So now he's in a foreign country, and he's living under a house, waiting on his contacts to help him get the money up to get home. Hello. But I'm going to the nations. I mean, it is what it is, and I'm not trying to be funny. Because me and the guy, we still good friends to this day. And I ain't got a whole ton of folks I call friends. But, I can call him up right now if I needed to. And the point I'm trying to make to you is that when you are going into places like that, just because somebody on the internet or somebody says, man of God, we need you, you must come, you must do this, you must do it. Just because they do that doesn't mean it's legit, really doesn't mean a whole lot of nothing until you can substantiate that.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to bust nobody's bubble, but I want you all to understand why you have to go through seasons of being unknown. Because you must learn how to get knowledge, you must learn how to get information, you must go through some stuff that you must become a problem solver. If you cannot be a problem solver, this is not the ministry you might not want to do. And I'm not trying to be funny, and I know there's people watching me right now, and I want them to understand, because this is about solving and dealing with issues. Yes. What happened when David came out? Look at what was happening there. But every time there was an issue put before him, he dealt with the issue. Yeah. He dealt with the issue. David was the Antoine Fisher of his time. He dealt with the issue. Every time. And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying to you all. You must learn how to deal with those issues. When do you learn how to deal with them? Not when you're out there in front of them. David learned to deal with stuff when he was up on the mountain. What did he say? What did he tell Saul that day? He said, I fought with bears and lions. Mm-hmm. So I can handle this. I can handle this uncircumcised Philistine who desires to insult the country of Israel. I can handle him. I'll deal with that. Because I put my work in. This is the problem that so many of us have. And I want you all, as you go forward, to understand this is what you got to do. Because I spam again. This is what you got to do. Because if you don't do it, guess what? It will come back and it will tell on you. And this is why you go through these seasons. Because we see people who look at other people and say, I want to do that. Mm-hmm. I want to do this. Mm-hmm. First of all, you don't know what they've been through to be able to do that. And you might not, chances are, you very well probably don't know what's happening in their life right now. And many times you might see them people and they're about that close from having a breakdown. Things ain't straight. This is not a game. And the problem, we're almost through, but the problem is that so many of us are so proud that I got to prove myself. I need to prove, who are you proving yourself to? There's always going to be jealous people. You need to learn how to handle it. There's always going to be people that seem like they're trying to hold you back. You're always going to have them. You're always going to have people that can't make up their mind on you. You're always going to have people that are on and off with you. Today we good, tomorrow we ain't. You're always going to have them. The reality is these are your giants that you have to continue to deal with to continue to grow. I use David because he's such a great example for you and I to look at and to see this is how we grow. This is how we grow. Imagine you slaying the giant, now you move into the palace. Imagine you're coming from being somebody who was practically sleeping on the floor. Because remember, I told you, and David, if you're researching, it's apparent he was an outside child. And so now when you look at his life, he's done went from somebody who was walking around saying these are not a cause to now he is in the palace. He's been promised a wife, and he's got a life in front of him, and he's been through a season now of adjustment. So he's went from nobody to somebody. And what is the scripture saying? Saul has killed thousands, but David is 10,000. Imagine how Saul feels. Imagine him hearing that. Here's somebody that was just shoveling sheep dung a few days ago, to now he's here in the palace and he's arrived. Can you handle this type of transition? You can handle it if you keep the main thing the main thing. And for many of us, sometimes it takes time to understand what the main thing is. And so when you don't understand, you'll be too busy looking at the lights. You'll be too busy looking at the shadow to hear what God is saying. Can God trust you on this type of stage? That's the question I'm asking you. There'll be seasons of fake people, seasons of fake friends. There'll be cutthroats, backstabbers, all of them. Can God trust you? Did you learn these lessons? Did you get what you needed when it was just you and God? Did you understand the signs that God was showing you, was giving you? It's amazing because so many of us all the time, look, everybody ain't working witchcraft for me. Can I just be honest? Everybody's not working witchcraft. Now, some folk are, don't get me wrong. Some folk are, but not everybody. Everybody ain't casting spell. Everybody ain't trying to curse you. Can you learn how to discern what's going on? And if you need to take responsibility, take responsibility. Because seasons of frustration, I found out some of the best times in my life was seasons of frustration. I can't speak for y'all, I can only speak for Ken. Those are some of the best times in my life. Because if it wasn't for them seasons of frustrations, I wouldn't have learned how to do this. I wouldn't have learned how to do that. I wouldn't be able to do this. And that's not right. Because I ain't ashamed to talk about it. Because I've been there and done that. And we'll go again. You must be able to handle disappointment and failure. Because they're two of the best friends you're going to have. Disappointment and failure are two of the best friends you're going to have. Well, Cox, everybody talking about you. I know. Cox, they saying this. Yep, sure is. That's what you're going to do, not a doggone thing. Keep going. You must be able to handle it. One of the things I was listening, I heard, anybody ever watch Denzel Washington movies? Y'all know who he is, an actor.
Yes.
Many people, he's a good actor. But he said something that just stuck with me one day, and I never forgot it. He said, if you don't fail, fail big. Mm-hmm. He said, fail big. He said, I failed big. I failed to the point where everybody around was talking about it. Everybody had something to say. He said, but he's very spiritual, and I listen, and I liked it. Sometimes listening to some things I've heard him say, because he said, when God raised me back up, he said, I didn't have to worry about lending money to nobody. I said, man, you on point. I said, you're on point. And what he was saying was that because everybody had talked about it, ran through the mud, said so much crap about it, till now when God had raised him up, you can't even come to him. You can't even say hello. Because you've done so much dirt, so much damage to it, tried to ruin his reputation, tried to kill his character. So now you can't even go in his presence. Welcome to the real world. Understand that. Learn from your seasons of frustration. Learn from your times of disappointment. Learn from those times where you think, you know what, this shouldn't be like this. Maybe it should. But what is it that I haven't seen? And if you learn from them, those will be the things, with you being an unknown prophetic ministry, those will be the things that you need to do to grow. Those will be the things that you need to learn. Because I can assure you, you're gonna go places, everybody ain't prophets there. So when you go somewhere and you start seeing something that nobody else is seeing, how do you handle that? How do you process that? That's going to be very important. And this is why your relationship with God is a very precious thing. Because the way you think, the way you process, the way you handle are things that are very important. This is about succeeding. So this is about succeeding. And last thing I'll tell you is this. You might start on this journey with 15, 20 people, all y'all prophets, and we seeing everything. Oh God, I'm seeing, oh God, the Lord showed me this. Oh God, the Lord showed me this. Oh God, girl, I saw this last night. Girl, I saw this last night. Wonderful. Keep in mind along the way. What are you doing? I'm just demonstrating how people fall off along the way. I'm demonstrating on how lonely the road is. I'm demonstrating on when you don't have a lot of friends in the world, and the few that you do have, you know who they are. I'm demonstrating as you walk this journey why it's important that you take advantage of the times when you're all alone. Because many times it's just you and God. It's just you and God. Imagine going somewhere and it's just you and God. I did go into a church one time. My wife was with me. And the lady cussed me out the whole service. This is a true story. She cussed me out there was a lady in that church. She cussed me out the whole service. To this day, I still haven't heard her. But my wife said, well, she sat right in front of you, but I never heard her because my focus wasn't on her. I never heard her. And ask my wife, pretty much all y'all know my wife, except for you. But if you ask my wife, she'll tell you. And to this day, I can tell you, I never heard her. She said she would call me everything but a child of God. She would. I never heard her. The reason I attribute it to, because She wasn't my focus. She wasn't my focus. I wasn't there for her. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. Being an unknown ministry, people run from the status of being, no, nobody know me, nobody. People run from that status. You better take that status and thank God that you got it. Because it's in that status where you'll develop. We're going to take a break. Y'all give our audience a hand that's watching today. Come on, give them a hand. At what? 2:30. All right. That is what it says, 2:30. 2:30.